Welcome to the 170th Landon Lecture on Public Affairs. The Landon Lectures began in 1966, initiated by the late Governor Alf Landon and the late K-State President James McCain. The goal of the Landon Lectures is to bring the most prominent thought leaders to Kansas State University to discuss the pressing issues of today. And I think you will see that our speaker today will do just that. I'm going to start by welcoming Dr. Mehmood Khan to the Landon podium to join 169 predecessors in bringing their thoughts and opinions on important public issues to Kansas State. But before I give him a complete introduction, let me introduce some special guests that are here with us this morning. As I say your name, would you stand and remain standing, and then we will jointly give them a round of applause. Dr. Jackie Hartman, Chair of the Landon Lecture Series and Chief of Staff in the Office of the President. Dr. Barry Flinchbaugh, Chair of the Landon Patrons. Dr. Fred Guzik, President of the Faculty Senate and Professor of Marketing at K-State Polytechnic. Jessica Vang Rankin, K-State Student Body President and Junior in Political Science. Trenton Kennedy, entrepreneurship and major here, and the Vice President of our student body. Would you join me in giving them a round of applause? Now let me introduce our honored guest. Dr. Mehmood Khan is the Vice Chairman of PepsiCo and Chief Scientific Officer for Global Research and Development. Dr. Khan oversees PepsiCo's global performance with purpose initiatives to enhance the environment, human, and talent sustainability for the company. PepsiCo, which has 22 different brands that generate $1 billion each in estimated annual sales. What a large enterprise he's in charge of. Dr. Khan also leads the company's research and development efforts, creating innovations in food and beverages. As chair of PepsiCo's Sustainability Council, he oversees and guides the company's initiatives that help protect and conserve global water supplies, develop innovative packaging to minimize its products' impact on our environment, eliminate solid waste in landfills from its production facilities, reducing company-wide absolute greenhouse gas emissions, and supporting sustainable agricultural efforts by expanding best practices with the company's growers and suppliers. He also strengthens PepsiCo's global network and knowledge base by launching research projects with leading universities, some here at Kansas State University, and technology companies spearheading agricultural and nutrition science initiatives. Before joining PepsiCo, Dr. Khan was president of Takeda Global Research and Development and was a faculty member at the Mayo Clinic and Mayo School of Medicine in Rochester, Minnesota. Having Dr. Khan here at Kansas State University is truly exciting because of the many common challenges his company and we as a university address: sustainability, global food systems, feeding an ever-increasing population with nutritionally quality foods without increasing the load on our environment. It's personally rewarding for me to greet a colleague, a nutrition professional with such a large company. Would you join me in helping to welcome Dr. Mehmood Khan to the stage for the 170th Landon Lecture?
Thank you. Good morning. It's truly a pleasure. My first trip to Manhattan, Kansas. I came from the other Manhattan, and it was a wonderful evening last night. But I have to mention that I did, for the first time in my life, experience a tornado warning. Got to go downstairs, I understand the Speakeasy is a special place, and I got there without membership last night. But I do assure you we did not partake in any of the choices down there. Thank you, Provost Mason, for that very kind invitation, and to everyone at Kansas State University for your kind invitation and warm welcome. It is an honor to be here today and to join the ranks of those who have come before me in delivering this lecture over the past 50 years or so. Now, before we get started, I want to make clear a misperception. It's about my work at PepsiCo. When I was introduced, you might have been given the impression that at PepsiCo my job is to make foods and beverages. That's reasonable to conclude. After all, we make snacks down in Texas, we blend naked juice out in California, we milk Quaker oats right here in the Midwest, and we bottle and can Diet Pepsi up in New York and around the world. You've seen our trucks on highways and on grocery store docks unloading our products and stocking them on store shelves. In fact, worldwide, we make and sell nearly 3,000 different food and beverage products around the world. I'm not disputing we make food and beverages, but I want you to understand that making food and beverages is just a detail. Let me be clear. It's a very, very, very important detail. In fact, we've been manufacturing and shipping and selling PepsiCo products. That's the easy part. We've been doing it for a very long time, and if you excuse my immodesty, we're pretty good at it. What we really do at PepsiCo, though, and in particular my job, is to make choices. And that's what I want to talk about today. We make thousands of choices every day. Choices that determine what people will eat and how much they'll pay for their food. Choices about where to source our ingredients or not to. Choices about whom to hire or promote or whom to pass over. And let me tell you, consistently, making the smart choice, the fair choice, the right choice is a lot harder than making a bag of potato chips. I share this story with you today because all of you who are in this room are in the business of making choices too. We make different types of choices, but we all make choices. And now more than ever, current and future leaders are being presented with choices, hard choices, choices that we'll get right or might get wrong. Let's hope we do the right thing. Because now we're operating in a world where new technologies are forcing us to make choices that sometimes place progress and fairness into conflict. Which is why I want to challenge us today to start thinking differently about the way we approach our work and about the intended and unintended consequences of our choices. It is also why I also want to thank all of you, the faculty, staff, students, and friends of Kansas State, for giving me the privilege to stand before you to share my views and join the roster of distinguished speakers who precede me as Landon lectures. 6 former U.S. presidents, world leaders, Supreme Court justices, CEOs, and many, many others. But let me first touch about the food and environment around sustainability. One of the biggest challenges we face today is how to feed an expanding global population. And this isn't just a problem that impacts the ag majors in this room or the people who work in the food and beverage industry. I assure you, it's a problem that impacts every single person on the planet today. In the richest parts of the world, too many people consume too much. And in the poorest parts of the world, too many people don't have enough to eat. The gap, unfortunately, is widening. Consider this. The global population of our planet will expand from 7 billion to 9.5 billion people by the year 2050. 70% of those 9.5 billion, that's 7 billion, will be living in large cities around the world. Think of this. The entire population of the planet today, equivalent of that, will be living in cities. Let me underscore this part. We'll have 2.5 billion more mouths to feed, in addition to the 900 million to 1 billion today that already go to bed hungry every night. This is not a problem around just outside our country. 60 million Americans are living on assisted food stamps or some other program related to it. 1 in 5 Americans. This is truly a national and global challenge for all of us. At the same time, over the next 35-year period, food availability and prices will become more volatile. Shortages in water, energy, and land will impact how people will eat or not eat. The path we are on is not sustainable. We have some hard choices to make. For example, should we continue to invest in potato and corn production on a global scale? That's something we are thinking about at PepsiCo. Or should we migrate to alternative crops that might be gentler on the land or require less water to thrive? At my company, there are literally dozens of choices like this that we're confronted with every single day. And then there are even harder choices. If 25 or 35 years from now, poverty is increasing, how do we fairly price our foods and beverages and make them safe, healthy food available to all? And here's a horrible choice I hope we never have to make. If demand for food is greater than the supply in 25 years from now, who gets fed and who does not? And who should make that choice? Who has the right to? And it isn't just food. We are already living in an era where we might be having to make choices around access to healthcare or education, housing, and now the very basic of things, human nourishment. It is a daunting task ahead of us. But it isn't just the environment. Let's think about the social and economic impacts of sustainability or lack of it. When it comes to the choices we face, I'm talking about not only the choice to sustainable food production, but ensuring sustainable societies too. Of the 7 billion people who inhabit the planet today, most of them, the vast majority, that is 90%, are being left behind. If we want to help them catch up, we're going to have to make some hard choices about technology. I'm a scientist. I've had a wonderful journey in my career learning from many, many teachers about science and technology. I get as excited as anyone in this room when new technologies emerge. Like many of you, two of my favorite words in the English language are disruptive technology. But we have a responsibility to consider the unintended consequences of technological disruption, which can decimate livelihoods and displace people. Let me tell you what I mean. For you students in this room, I want to take you back on a journey to a college in the past. Many others in this room may relate to this era. When I was a student back in the late 1970s in Liverpool, England, where I grew up, I used to go to the local record store to buy albums. Yes, there were such a thing as albums. They were made, and my favorite music at the time, not surprisingly, was the hometown band, a little-known place called Liverpool, called the Beatles. When I needed money to buy books for the semester, I went to a bank around the corner from where we had our dorms and stood in line to cash a check handed to me by a teller. Yes, there were tellers. When I needed a taxi, I stood on the corner like everybody else and waited the arrival of one of those iconic British black taxi cabs. Why do I say that? Well, now fast forward to today. Today you press an icon on your phone and a private car will arrive moments later at your doorstep. Today bank lobbies are empty because most people bank online. Today the record store no longer exists because music fans stream music. There's no such thing as a travel agent that you ever need to visit. All of this is welcome news for everybody in this room. Technology, in some ways, has made our life simpler and convenient. But what happens to all those people, most of them underskilled? The teenage clerk at the record store, the single mom who works as a bank teller, the third-generation taxi driver, and tens of millions more of them who have been displaced by technology. Technology disrupts. And some people say the disrupted must learn new skills and adapt to the global economy. This may be true, but increasingly many people who have been disrupted are not adapting. Instead, they're responding to unprecedented levels of stress and anxiety by causing disruptions of their own. They're making themselves heard, even here in America. And unfortunately, some of our political leaders use this as an opportunity rather than uniting us, but dividing us. And that is not sustainable. Now imagine that you're an inhabitant of the Middle East or Africa, or parts of South America, where the challenges are exponentially larger, where technology either lags or has leapfrogged over the majority of the population, where there is chronic economic immobility and even retardation, where access to safe food and drinkable water is limited. They are making themselves heard too, not only in their home countries, but now across the world. The path we're on is not politically, socially, or economically sustainable. We have some hard choices to make, which brings me to the next point, which is ethical sustainability. I sometimes worry that the path we're on is clearly not ethically sustainable. We recognize it. Do we have the courage to act and do the right thing? With too much frequency, we hear about business crises, from oil spills to E. coli breakouts to economic meltdowns on Wall Street. In the aftermath of business scandals, after the autopsies have been performed by the news media, regulators, commentators, and lawyers, we often discover that the crisis situations were not acts of God or accidental mishaps. Rather, they were acts of greed and hubris. Somebody got cute, but then they got caught. In fact, in some industries today, not many, thankfully, but in some, executives actually perform cost-benefit analyses of obeying the law or breaking it. They bake the cost of product recalls or government fines into their business plan. And when their misdeeds are made public, instead of owning responsibility, they evade it. The institutions and individuals who get themselves into these messes are often proudly, almost belligerently, mathematical in their thinking. They crunch the numbers, they run their risk models, they pride themselves on their analytics, and they look at their data. They view almost any topic as a math problem to be solved. This is of relevance to our teaching and academic institutions because, as I'm going to touch on, the ethical aspect of that has to be instilled during the formative years of their educational process. Education surely goes beyond the facts. And it is the responsibility of all of us, academicians and business leaders, to address this. Because it is these few who don't recognize or even calculate the impact of their actions. Ethical lapses have created a crisis of confidence in many of our great public institutions. And not just our biggest companies. This is not just a private sector issue. The public's confidence in academia, where I launched my own career, may be greater than it is in business or in Congress, but confidence in academic institutions has recently slipped also. And for similar reasons, unfortunately. Every couple of years, it seems there's a scandal in academia, whether it's related to plagiarism, or grant-making, or conducting scientific studies that do more to capture headlines or funding than advance common knowledge and understanding. The erosion of public confidence in our great institutions itself is not sustainable. Our public is losing trust in institutions in general. We have some hard choices to make. But I'm an optimist. I think we can choose wisely, and unfortunately, the majority of us are already making wise choices on a daily basis. Collectively, we can have a huge and powerful impact. Let me touch a little bit on this global canvas for a minute. Today, as learning is shared and new technologies are exported globally, we are presented with the opportunity to paint on a very big canvas. A century ago, a student at this university might have applied his or her learning on the family farm. Perhaps a couple of 100 acres in Franklin or McPherson County. I can't imagine that individual was likely to have given much thought to how his or her work might impact people in Eastern Europe or Southeast Asia. But today, the work that men and women at this university conduct in research, in bioenergy, animal health, plant science, food safety and security has global implications. The same progress you bring to Franklin County can be shared with farmers across the world in Thailand, or in Africa, or in South America, and make their lives better. I marvel at how big our canvases have become. When I started my career as a physician, I treated one patient at a time, individual patients. I went on to lead discovery of drugs at a large pharmaceutical company where I had the chance to impact hundreds of thousands, if not millions of patients through that work. Today, I work for a company that provides more than 1 billion servings of food a day to people in more than 200 countries. My work impacts people truly across the globe. It's a great privilege. It's a huge responsibility. Nearly a decade ago, when I joined PepsiCo, we saw a growing consumer focus on health and wellness and rising environmental concerns in communities across the globe. At the same time, we also looked out across the business landscape that operated under a false assumption that sustainability and profitability had to be an either-or choice. We decided that was not the way to look at it, not today, but 10 years ago. Against that backdrop, we resolved to embed sustainability into our business and make sustainable business a growth engine for PepsiCo. It was our premise then, as now, that sustainability and profitability not only can be, but must be inextricably linked if a company expects to retain its license to operate in society. What was a fairly novel idea back has gained enormous traction a decade later. I'm heartened to see that more individuals and institutions are beginning to choose this path, especially an emerging class of socially minded entrepreneurs, and I'm hoping many of those in this room, those future leaders and entrepreneurs, are going to continue building on that momentum. There is truly a shift underway. Not so long ago, companies made money any way they could, and made as much of it as they could. And if after all that, when there was some left over, that was donated as a charity. Philanthropy was the mechanism. While that's important, today, how you make your money has become as important as how much money you make. But heading down that path of ethical sustainability presents a new set of choices. And that's what I want to finish off touching on. I'm a scientist. Many of you in this audience are either trained scientists or training to become one. We scientists usually launch a scientific inquiry by asking a deceptively simple question. Can we do this? At my company, those questions might look like, can we take an iconic food product that's loved by millions and increase its nutritional value without compromising its taste and its good standing in the market? Can we improve sustainability on the farms where our raw ingredients are grown, whether they're oats, potato, grains, or citrus fruit? Can we reduce our water consumption by 50%? Can we capture even bigger crop yields while using even less water and land? And we're working on all of those problems and many, many more. However, the next question is much harder, which is the how will we and who will we partner with? This is where the sleeves are rolled up. This is where the real science gets done. The computer modeling, the lab testing, the prototypes that fail and fail and fail again. I failed often as a scientist. But then, hoping you finally get it right. For a food and beverage company, that translates into putting new or improved products on the grocery shelf. For you, that might mean conducting experiments and publishing your research in an academic journal. For a member of Congress, that might mean shepherding a legislative proposal into law. That is the how. But there is a third question. This question is tougher, and I'm increasingly asking ourselves this question. It's not the what, it's not the how, it's the should we. Should we do this? It's the hardest question of all. A question, frankly, I was not trained or well prepared for as a medical student or a graduate student. As a scientist, a person like me is trained to be deductive. I'm discovering that my job today is requiring I become a lot more inductive in my approach to problem solving. I have to see around corners. I have to factor in the unintended consequences that scientific breakthroughs can generate. I have to figure out how to balance progress with fairness. Increasingly, I'm requiring that the people who work for me do the same, which means I have to bring close to me, under the tent, people who have completely different backgrounds, who think differently, who have trained differently. And what used to be the norm, that is bringing the technologists, the business leaders, and the leaders from the social arts coming together to ask challenging questions, the toughest of which is, should we actually do this? What are the implications? I have an R&D team of more than 2,000 scientists. Their job is to innovate, to make existing products better and invent new. On their best days, they invent entirely new food and beverage categories, as they have here in the US and around the world. They're under pressure to perform. I've given the team a huge target with huge dollar figures behind it. Let me give you just one story of how this conversation is evolving. Not too long ago, during a brainstorm session at PepsiCo, a new product idea was introduced by one of our R&D people. It was a product that I'm certain would have benefited our bottom line, at least in the short term. I'm not sure it would have delivered much benefit to the people we feed in more than 200 countries. I wasn't in attendance at that brainstorm session. But later I learned someone felt empowered to speak up and say, even though we have the technology to make this product, I don't think we should launch it. Apparently, a consensus soon emerged that was simply not the right thing to do. And without waiting for me to spike the product and kill the project, which I would have, the team walked away from what promised to be a certain moneymaker for the short term, and the idea never made it to my desk. Only the story of how the idea was killed. At the risk of being immodest for the second time today, this might be the greatest compliment I've ever received in my career. This was a team that felt empowered to make the right decision for the long term, not just the short term. A group of scientists who thought it was their responsibility, their accountability. For people like you and me who work in science and technology professions, we are going to be presented with more choices like these increasingly over the coming years. And that's influencing the way we choose our employees at PepsiCo. I can tell you that inside my company, it is these scientists and scientists like them who transcend the purely quantitative, that we recruit, promote, and do everything within our power to retain. In fact, it is my belief that the people who assume leadership positions in the science and technology industries, a generation from now, will be those who choose progress and fairness as the right path. I'm convinced those fusions of skills will benefit not only the public that the scientists are serving, but will also help their own careers develop. Because hard science and technology skills are all perishable products. The average lifespan of knowledge and technology today is 5 years. That's right, 5 years from the point a student leaves your graduate lab or your lecture theaters. 5 years later, half of what you taught them will be obsolete. I've been out of school 25 years. Heaven knows how little I really know anymore. Man, it started declining the day I got my certificate. That's right. Almost everything we know about how to grow grain, farm our land, or treat a cancer will be obsolete in about 60 months. All of us who work in the fields represented here today must keep updating and relearning our skills for the rest of our careers. And I hope we're training our students to be career students. They do not graduate. We did not graduate. All we did was transition from one phase of training to a phase of self-learning. And science skills are just details. They are very, very, very important details, but still details nonetheless. That's why I believe our next generation leaders are thinking and behaving in ways that fuse progress with fairness. They remain deeply committed to the core tenets of science, of course. They seek answers to the most stubborn problems. They are innately curious. They relentlessly probe. They generate reams and reams of good, solid data. They develop steel-trap minds. And for those of you who don't have a traditional science background, you might be saying, well, what about the non-scientists? Well, let me challenge you. Because as a Greek philosopher who was once asked, could you tell me what a scientist is? And he said, and I'm paraphrasing deliberately, a scientist is a man or a woman who is in the habit of observing and learning. That's all a scientist is. It's not somebody with a degree. It's not somebody who studied chemistry or biology. But if you are in the habit and have the training and the eye to observe, not see, observe, and learn from those observations, then you are a scientist. But these scientists of today don't stop there. They have to see around corners. They bring creativity and compassion to their work. They use science and technology, hopefully, to connect the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots, so that we all get our equal share. We help bring progress to the people who need it most, to help elevate the 90% of the planet's population that is lagging behind. They do both. I've talked a lot this morning about the choices people who work in our fields must confront. I could give you hundreds more to choose from. Instead, in closing, I'd like to present just one. If there's one choice I'd encourage all of us here to make today, and that is, instead of choosing either to become the uber-rational Mr. Spock or the ultra-compassionate Mother Teresa, let us choose to become both. And let us hope that our leaders, instead of picking on our differences and dividing us, can actually look at our commonalities and the common good of a planet that we all share. That if we do not collectively work together to get it right, not only will our planet suffer, but if we leave 90% of humanity behind, we will see conflict that cannot be resolved just by isolating ourselves from the rest of the world. Because it is institutions like yours, companies like mine, and hopefully the right government, the right regulations, and the right media coming together not to sensationalize problems, but to work together to solve them. Because together, when we do all of that, we will change this world for the better. I guarantee it. Thank you very much.
I ask anyone who has a question or a comment for Dr. Khan to come to the two mics at the side of the room. Please, go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The production of palm oil has been linked to child labor, forced labor, wage theft, and suppression of independent labor unions. In response to this crisis, right now, people across the planet are standing in solidarity with these workers. We're calling on PepsiCo to stop this exploitation now. As chair of PepsiCo's Sustainability Council, part of your role is to drive improvements in the practices of PepsiCo's growers and suppliers. How will you ensure the exploitation of workers in PepsiCo's palm oil supply chain will stop?
That's a wonderful question. I'm glad you brought it up. In fact, one of the earliest things we did in the council that I chair, and we've made this public announcement, and you can go onto our website to verify, that we are now committed to 100% certified by independent bodies sustainable palm oil, which includes labor practice as well as deforestation, animal and human rights combined. Already made that commitment, it's public.
That's not until 2020, and that does not include Indofood in Indonesia.
Actually, it includes all of our suppliers that sell to us, and that is also public. And secondly, we had to say 2020 because we now have to build the supply chains to get all the certification done. Once you make the commitment, as you know, in any agricultural industry, it takes about 48 to 60 months to get the whole supply chain certified. Already made that commitment.
Okay.
On this side, please.
Hi. Well, first I'd like to thank you for joining us at K-State today. My name is Morgan, and I'm studying psychology and natural resources and environmental sciences. And my question is about sustainability. So PepsiCo is a major consumer of palm oil, and palm oil is driving the destruction of tropical rainforest that we must keep intact to secure a safe climate. So PepsiCo's current palm oil policy isn't applying to its suppliers in Indonesia, and that's the country with the highest rates of deforestation. So what is PepsiCo currently doing to stop the massive greenhouse gas emissions associated with its use of palm oil?
I think I just answered that question, didn't I?
Well, but with the loophole in Indonesia, it's not currently covering those. So what are you guys doing, I guess also worldwide with greenhouse gas emissions?
So I think you're asking two different questions, so let me address the first one again. It's something I am very passionate about. We've made a commitment publicly that by 2020 we will go to 100% certified sustainable palm oil, certified not by PepsiCo, but by independent NGOs that are in the business of doing this. And it is my responsibility to make sure the palm oil we buy for PepsiCo products is 100% sustainable. However, I also believe in the sovereign rights of every country, and if a country and their government and their people choose through the democratic process to have alternative practices, as long as they're not supplying it to me, I don't have jurisdiction for that. I can express an opinion, I can lead by action, but I do not have the right as an American to tell another country what to do, just as that country doesn't have the right to tell us. Thank you.
Please.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I'm a master's student in the sensory evaluation program. So one of the big things about sustainability is the packaging that we put our food and beverages in. But the problem is some of the consumer trends lead to more packaging. Like they want more, it's more convenient to have a single size. So at what point do you stop listening to the consumer trends and more go towards the sustainable and more environmental practices?
Sure. I think it's a great question, and we are a consumer company. Every single person in this room, without exception, I would guarantee is a Pepsi customer. This room is all Pepsi customers. Now, you might say, I don't drink Pepsi, the brand. Well, that's 13% of my business. You're a Quaker Foods customer, you're a Sabra hummus customer, you might buy Frappuccino at Starbucks, or you might buy Tropicana orange juice or naked juice. I guarantee you're a Pepsi customer. Now, so the people in this room are making the choices. At the end of the day, I serve you. And I think the partnership here that's important is not for me to drive the customer, but the customer together. Just like you do as a university, it's heartening to hear you have student representatives on your governing body. It's a partnership between faculty and students. In this case, the students are the customer. In the same way, we work together with our customers. We can bring propositions, and there's a wonderful book written called Nudge. We are working to nudge the consumer along in the right direction. And that's what we have to do. But what we sometimes forget is the reason we have packaging also, and many scientists in this room who are actually researching in this field, it's about product safety and integrity and protecting the product. And so you have to be careful you don't compromise consumer safety with withholding the packaging. Do I see a future in the world where we will have sustainable packaging that actually is environmentally safe, is safe of not polluting our oceans or not filling our landfills? Absolutely. I'm an optimist. I believe together, scientists and industry on both sides are going to work on this problem, are working on this problem, we'll solve it. So I have committed significant PepsiCo resources to embark for many years on that direction. As the head of R&D and sustainability, the most powerful impact I can do is actually create the pull on industry so the supply chain will invest behind it, and behind that, the universities will invest. But let me throw a challenge out to your scientists and to you. Find me the sustainable packaging so we can not make an either-or choice, but as I said in my speech, a both choice. Let's hope we can do it. And I believe you will actually do it. Thank you for that question.
I'd like to ask a question of you. I've been out of school a few more years than you have, and I used to torture myself looking at my biology textbook, my Biology 101 textbook, What would you challenge our students? You gave advice to our students, but our undergraduates, our graduate students, what would you challenge them to do in their studies that can help them continue learning constantly and be prepared for the changing global economy that you've described?
You know, it's a great question in the sense that even today when I teach part-time, often to either nutrition or business students, we often spend a lot of time as students learning facts. It really absorbs so much of our time. And so that addresses the question of what do I need to know? Rarely, and unfortunately not enough, do we spend the time not asking what happens in nature, but why does it happen, how does it happen? And I think the minute we transcend from learning facts to starting becoming curious minds, the curiosity is what will transcend above this and continue as this path. So I like to tell my students, be curious. Be curious not for the sake of a grade, but be curious because you want to know. And that is what will allow you to start to pick up a book, a journal, an article, which has nothing to do with your field. And it will open your eyes because you just wanted to learn. I hope that's what we give our students time to do, and we challenge them to do. They will become lifelong students.
Thank you. We're here.
Hello, my name is Charles Little. I'm a marketing major here. But I love the fact that you said scientists are the people who observe and have a willing or are able to learn from those observations. I believe in marketing. That's what we do. We observe daily. And what information would you have for someone who has a desire to take that observation and that marketing perspective and wishes to join the cause in making more healthy foods? How would you integrate that into the company?
That's a truly powerful both question and statement, and I'm glad you brought it up. Marketing clearly, in my mind, as are many of the sociology and traditional topics, are sciences, by that definition that I just said. Look, if we can figure out how to communicate to consumers and decision makers, and I say decision makers because in our business, 70 to 75% of our products are actually purchased by a woman. 50-some% are consumed by a guy, so let's not get into that. But the majority of the decisions, in terms of our business, a woman is the decision maker. Now, the guy, I'm sure, like many guys in this room and like myself, think they're making the decisions, but you know, I've been married 33 years and it's a heck of a marketing campaign by my wife. But the power then lies in how do we get decision makers to make the right choice as they're making the trade-off. And when they make those choices, can we communicate that and can we impart on them this balance? I think it's getting better. It's getting much better because the consumer is much more informed. People are reading labels. There's been an interesting evolution here. When I was growing up, I learned about what I should eat, what I should do, what the norms were from my parents and grandparents' generation. They told us. I'm blessed to have a 7-year-old grandson who's in first grade. Today, it's my grandson informing me. It's our children's generation informing the parents' generation. The norm of what is acceptable in our household is increasingly being determined not by the elder in the home, but the younger. Many of you who are parents and grandparents hopefully will relate. It's your children who say, well, Mom, we can't do that. Dad, we can't do that. And I think that is evolving. And I think there's been a wonderful knowledge that's growing, but with one caveat. There's also a lot of misinformation out there. There are 10,000 different food bloggers on the social media. 10,000. Many, many of them, unfortunately, don't have the factual background to make accurate nutritional statements. And that's when you get into demonization of categories, processes, without understanding the interlinking of so many things. Can we as marketers change that? There are so many things that now I'm convinced social media, marketing, science have to come together. Unfortunately, we scientists are some of the worst marketers on the planet. I wish we could change because we need to educate the population of the facts in a balanced way, not in a skewed way.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm sorry. The response that you gave earlier to the girl on the other side, you said that you don't control regulations in other countries, according to, pertaining to your suppliers. I guess I kind of started my own business myself, and so I feel like as part of sustainability and ethically and morally, finding the right supplier is very important, especially in today's climate and advertising and marketing. So I guess I just didn't really like your response of you saying that you're not responsible for other governments' policies, but yet you're responsible for your own policies.
Yes.
I think Dr. Khan has answered your question. Thank you.
You know, but can you imagine if another country, sovereign country, came into our nation and told us what our law should be? Would that be acceptable to us?
But as a businessman, that's also your responsibility to not use child labor and slavery.
I agree. I agree.
So you're 100% committed to ending child labor and slavery and deforestation.
I've already told you, go on our website, we've said we will only source 100% certified palm oil. I can't say any more than that. But anyway, let's move on.
I think there's a question behind you.
Just to clarify, if I understand correctly, and I applaud this, what you're saying is that you buy from suppliers who meet your standards. If there are countries such as Indonesia who do not meet your standards, you don't buy from them, but you can't force them to change. Do I have that right?
If there are, I didn't say countries, if there are suppliers that
sorry.
meet our standards, then we only buy from those that meet our standards. If they don't, we don't buy them. We don't determine which country. Let's be careful here. I said this very much in our speech. Let us not paint entire nations and entire countries with the same brush. That is not what I said. There are good people and bad people in every country, including our own. Let us not judge countries. Let us not judge people. Let us not judge nations. All I said was the suppliers, the businesses we buy from, the materials that we buy, we can determine their standards.
I apologize for misstating because I did hear you say that. I felt that the misunderstanding was the feeling that you could somehow change something other than with your choice of from whom to buy. And I do applaud that attitude.
And I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
The question over here.
So, is PepsiCo today buying palm oil that is promoting deforestation and child labor and all of these things until 2020?
Don't you think it's time to move on to
Yes,
another
I
topic?
think it
and then
is.
I also have
think
a
it is.
follow-up about the 2020 policy. So, is what you're referring to the RSPO? Yes or no?
I'm referring to certified palm oil that is certified sustainable by whatever international authorities are out there designated to certify. I don't pick those standards. I do that. But it would be good to move on to another topic.
Yes,
There's
let's
so much to
do
our
that.
business. I agree.
Question over here. Thank you.
And this, I know this, we're running out of time, this may be the last one, and I'm going to change topics. I'm a little older than the average question asker today, and in my lifetime, I was raised on sugar. And then over the last 30, 40 years, we had all these different substitutes, and you talked about corn, and so what I want to know is sugar back?
Say that last statement again.
Is sugar coming back?
Well, look, we're in Kansas. What is interesting to me is, and I'm a nutrition physician, endocrinologist by training, the epidemic of celiac disease and gluten intolerance has suddenly gone up exponentially in one generation. I don't know why the genetics of our population suddenly became wheat averse, but I don't understand, since wheat is important to this state. At least that's my understanding. So whether it's wheat or starch or sugar, we as humans have been living in this ecosystem of balance for at least 10,000 years as we've evolved, right? My ancestors came from India, also a grain, wheat, dairy background. We've got into a debate of extremes. I think for those of us who do animal experiments, if you experiment on somebody, on an animal, or a human that lives only on one substrate, you can generate all sorts of data. You can go all the other extent and live completely on an animal protein diet, and I think you'll find another set of problems. Wherever you look, there will be problems. And yet, instead of these extremes, and many of that we've talked about today, at the end of the day, life is about balance. And if we can balance our nutrients, our macro and micronutrients, and balance that with a lifestyle that is also healthy from the expenditure side. I'm reminded when I was in class at University of Minnesota as a graduate student, reading the statistic that says at the turn of the 20th century, 1900, the average American consumed more calories per day than at the end of the 20th century, 21st century, I should say, in the year 2000. Our calorie consumption actually went down, but our body weights went up. What changed? Right? We came off the farms. We came off working. Everything became mechanized. And of course, we didn't adapt. So there is so much to moderation. I don't believe it's sugar or wheat or corn or anything. I think it's so long as you do this in balance, we're okay. We've been doing it for 10,000 years. We'll get it right again.
Dr. Khan, I want to thank you for ending us on the moderation message. It's a message I've been using for a very long time, and I think we've heard a great deal about PepsiCo, the extent of its products, and the work that they do that we probably were not aware of. Would you help me in thanking Dr. Khan for being our landing
Thank you.
officer?